What's up, Viego mans? It is me, and I am back making another patch review. It has been a while since I made one, but the reason that I have waited so long to make another one is because so much changed in the game, and I didn't want to make a review with information that I didn't feel was correct. And so I needed to test out all the items, all the builds, test out all the things, and understand them fully so that I can actually give you guys the best information possible on Viego. And I feel like now, going to patch 12.23, I actually do have enough information to reliably give you my opinion and advice on what to build. In this video, if you're confused about what to build on Viego, if you're confused about all these new tank mythics and what to do, what items are good on him, I'm going to explain everything in this video. If you want to learn what to build situationally on Viego, this is going to be the video for you. The main thing I want to talk about before we get into the builds is the changes that they made. So, in my opinion, and the opinion of most junglers, is that Moss Stomper, or the green Pokemon, the green jungle item, whatever you want to call it, the green smite, has been just far and away the best smite in the game for all junglers. Pretty much just, there's not that many scenarios where you would go a different one. Sometimes you would go blue, red is pretty bad, it still remains bad. However, green is getting a significant nerf. The tenacity buff duration is getting split in half, and they're changing the way the tenacity is applied, so it significantly reduces the value of green. And I think that instead of taking green, in a lot of scenarios, we'll be taking the blue smite. I think blue is sort of sleeper strong. It heavily increases your clear speed and also allows you to chase down a lot of people, especially in late game fights. I do think blue is underrated. However, green was just so good, like, you couldn't avoid taking it. However, now that green is getting a huge nerf, you may see yourself taking blue smite more often. I will be taking blue smite way more often. Now, the thing that's getting hit disgustingly hard is Ravenous Hydra, because they're removing the Omnivamp per stack, which was just such a huge reason why you took it. They're not reducing the price at all, so it's still the same expensive item that it was, except they're just removing an extreme amount of stats from Ravenous Hydra. And it makes me sad, because this item, while it was completely and utterly broken, deserving of the nerf, it was extremely fun to use and a huge part of a lot of Viego's builds. So I'm sad to see it go. I understand that it was too broken. The fact that this is getting removed in the way that it is, with no like price reduction whatsoever, pretty much just kills this item for me in a lot of ways. I think you might still be able to justify building it in like the full damage Kraken Slayer build, but realistically, this item is going to be seen a lot less on Viego, and you will not be building it nearly as much. Alright, now getting into the items, there are basically 4 main mythics that I think are going to be going, and I'm going to explain each and every mythic so that you are not confused as to when to go each one and why each one is good. So the 4 mythics are Jock Show, Heartsteel, Kraken Slayer, and Divine Sunder. I'm going to discuss each mythic one by one, so it's not super confusing, but just so you know, all these builds are optimal in most scenarios. So like, if you're somebody who freaks out at the idea of having to decide which mythic to go each game, and you just like one single mythic, feel free to just build any of these mythics, any of these builds every game, if that's what you're comfortable with, if you're overwhelmed by the item diversity. But if you're somebody who wants to maximize your ability to play Viego every single game, you should try to understand why you build each item or each mythic. Let's get on to the first one. So Jock Show, I think, is honestly probably the best item in the game right now, definitely one of the best. Jock Show, as you guys know, is being built on pretty much every champion, not just tanks. It just gives an absolutely insane amount of stats for basically free. It's a super cheap mythic, and it's just extraordinarily gold efficient. And one of the things that makes Viego so good with tank mythics is the fact that Blade of the Ruined King just can carry your damage so far. You just rush it first item, and the amount of damage that Viego can do with just that item alone is enough to compensate for the fact that he doesn't get much damage from his tank mythic. But the 200 power spike synergy with Bork and a tank mythic is insane. It's the same thing with Heartsteel that I'll explain later, but I think Jock Show is probably the best mythic in the game right now. What I was going before was I was going Bork into Jock Show into Ravenous Hydra, but due to the massive Ravenous Hydra nerfs, I don't think that it's actually going to be viable to go third item anymore. So I would recommend going Bork, Jock Show, Death's Dance, and then you can go a plethora of items after that. Those are really the main 3 core items that you need. Most games don't get past 3 items, but if you do, then just build situationally. But yeah, the main core items are Bork, Jock Show, Death's Dance. And when do you build this? So I would recommend building a tank mythic when you do not have a front line of your own, or the enemy has a bunch of CC. Because basically, if you're going to build like Kraken Slayer, for example, you're going to be a lot squishier. If the enemy team has CC, you get caught in CC, you're just going to die instantly. There's not really a way for you to avoid it. Like if you're against like a Maokai Sejuani combo, you get locked in one combo of CC and you're dead. But with Jock Show, you can actually survive that CC. And that's the main reason why you want to go a tank mythic, is when you can't survive on your own. This applies for Heartsteel and for Jock Show. So if you see yourself in a scenario where you're thinking, wow, I don't think I'm going to be able to survive the CC that they have on their team, just build tank gear. Even if they don't have a lot of CC, you can still build Jock Show. Like, I'm telling you, this item feels great. The one negative about Jock Show that I know a lot of people are going to mention is the fact that you do lose your stacks that you build up when you take possessions. However, in my experience, it doesn't actually matter that much. Really, once you get your first possession, that's when you start going in a team fight anyway. It's the time up until you get your first possession that matters the most, and Jock Show keeps you alive until that happens, and I think it is still a super valuable mythic, even though you do lose your stacks when taking possession, which is pretty annoying. But honestly, I don't think it affects Viego that much, and after a lot of testing, I would say that this is probably the best mythic. But let's go on to Heartsteel. Now, Heartsteel basically applies, everything that I said about Jock Show applies to Heartsteel. The only difference is that Heartsteel is basically just an HP steroid, but doesn't give you any resistances. So it's honestly more important that, like, into your 3rd and 4th item, you start building some resistances like Death's Dance, Maw, or, you know, Death's Dance GA if they're full armor. It gives you so much HP, and the good thing about Heartsteel is that it procs after 3 seconds of being within range of the enemy, and even if you're in a possession, that time that you spend in their area still counts. So when you like take a possession and then you ult and auto attack somebody, your Heartsteel will proc. So Heartsteel is honestly super good. I loved running it when it first came out. Then Jock Show got buffed, and I think it's a little bit better. A lot of people might like Heartsteel more because it feels like it synergizes more with Viego in the way that it procs. It kind of can feel like an extra burst of damage, like a Sheen proc sometimes. So Heartsteel's still super good. I think the issue with Heartsteel is that you need to get to a 3rd item in order for Heartsteel to be super valuable. I think Jock Show Bork is a stronger 2-item power spike, but Heartsteel has great scaling, as infinite scaling, and once you start getting some additional resistances to add to your HP, it's amazing. So honestly, Heartsteel plus Jock Show, it's really preference. It's hard to really determine which is better. It's pretty close. I just think that Jock Show is a better item right now. It's 200 gold cheaper. However, you know, like Titanic Hydra comboed with Heartsteel is better. I would say Heartsteel is probably a better item after a certain amount of HP stacks that you get, but the exact breakdown of when that is hard to say. So really try them both out and see which one you like the most. Now, Kraken Slayer, I would say Kraken Slayer was my favorite build to run before this patch. Now, I would say Kraken Slayer is probably not as good, because basically what you could do is you could go Bork, Kraken Slayer, Ravenous Hydra, and just be this insane glass cannon assassin 1v9 machine. Like, I did my not ending stream until I get 50 kills challenge, where I basically dropped like 500 total kills on a stream playing nothing but Kraken Slayer, Bork, Ravenous Hydra. It was just the most insane, fun build that I've tried in preseason. However, the Ravenous Hydra nerf it's just such a huge nerf, like such a ridiculously big nerf. Deserved, but ridiculously huge. So now you're kind of going back to the old Bork, Kraken Slayer, Death's Dance, which, you know, it's still good, still viable, but it's just definitely not going to pack the same punch as the other version of Kraken Slayer that we were running in previous batches. So I'm a little bit jaded and a little bit sad about that. However, Kraken Slayer is still super good. I would say that it's probably the best tank shredding build, and obviously it's difficult because tanks usually have a lot of CC, so it's a balancing act. Like, do you build the squishier build and try to withstand the CC? But on the same hand, the squishier build is better at dealing with the tanks. So the scenario in which I would build Kraken Slayer is if you have a good front line, a good team that can engage or peel for you, and they have a lot of tanks. So for example, if they have like a Dr. Mundo top and they have like a Sejuani jungle, but you have a really good front line that can engage or peel for you, basically your job is going to be to either assassinate the backline or help penetrate through the front line, and Bork, Kraken Slayer, Lord Dominik's, it's without a doubt going to do the most damage to those tanks. If you can just logically play out the scenario, like, is this a game where I can get away with going Kraken Slayer? Is this a game where I can be greedy for more damage? And the answer is yes, then you should always go Kraken Slayer in those scenarios. If you're thinking to yourself, I don't know if I'll be able to survive their CC, or fights are going to be too difficult later on, then you definitely are going to want to go a tankier mythic. And the final one is Divine Sunder. I still see people running Divine Sunder every game, and I do understand why. It is a tank meta, so basically people are thinking to themselves, well, Divine Sunder does percentage HP, so I think it would obviously be great to build this into a bunch of tanks, and you would mostly be right. But the thing that I feel in my experience with Divine Sunder is it just feels super underwhelming to build. It doesn't actually feel like you do that much extra damage, and I feel like Divine Sunder is just one of those items that is built on Viego because it's been built on Viego so often, and people build Divine Sunder when they don't know what else to build. So, like, for example, if like somebody plays Viego but doesn't play them every single game, like they're not a one trick, they're not going to just like randomly pick Viego and then build like 1 of 4 items. They're just going to build the one thing that they know the best, and that's Divine Sunder. In reality, I think that even though it does less damage, it's better to build a tank mythic versus other tanks, because the scenario you're going to run into versus tanks is they're just going to out sustain you if you can't like burst them down. And so having a tank mythic as well makes it so that you can basically stay in the fight and brawl with these tanks forever. And your Bork is eventually going to carry you through the fights with these tanks, as well as your tank mythics are going to keep you alive pretty much equal to the way they can keep themselves alive. Whereas Divine Sunder, I feel like it's kind of like double dipping. Like, it's a little bit tanky, it's a little bit damage, but doesn't do either of those things particularly well. I think that if you can think logically about the builds, you will find scenarios where Kraken Slayer is more efficient and the tank mythics are more efficient. And I think in most scenarios, there is a better option than Divine Sunder. However, if you don't really feel comfortable switching between mythics and understanding what to build situationally, I will say Divine Sunder is probably the most consistent. Also, I messed up in the beginning and said there were only 4 viable builds, but I just completely slipped my mind about Frostfire Gauntlet. Frostfire Gauntlet is an extremely viable mythic against full AD comps. So basically, Frostfire Gauntlet gives you only armor. It doesn't give you MR like it used to, but it gives you only armor. However, it's extremely good. It gives you a Sheen proc, it gives you the armor ability haste, and it's relatively cheap, 3,000 gold for a mythic. And in my experience, versus full AD teams, you just go Bork, Frostfire, Steel Caps, Death's Dance, GA, and you're just an unkillable monster. Like this, it almost feels like cheating, but in this scenario, you build Frostfire Gauntlet only when they're full AD. It is a full AD only build. If you're building this and they have a lot of magic damage, you might as well just go Jock Show. That's a better option. But if they're full AD, Frostfire Gauntlet is superior. And that's pretty much the only explanation you need for it, because it's very straightforward. If they're full AD, build Frostfire Gauntlet. You know, if you're doing the checklist, that's how you decide to build Frostfire. And the last thing I want to touch on is my statements about Divine Sunder versus all the other mythics. So these are the 5 mythics that I mentioned: Divine Sunder, Kraken Slayer, Frostfire Gauntlet, Jock Show, and Heartsteel. So obviously Divine Sunder has a significantly higher games played than the rest. However, if you just look at the win rates, all the other mythics that I mentioned are outperforming Divine Sunder. And if you think about it, Heartsteel and Jock Show and Frostfire Gauntlet are all like new or reworked. So it may take some time for people to get used to these new builds. So obviously they're going to have less games played and less experience with them. However, the fact that they already have higher win rates than 50%, and Divine Sunder is the only mythic that's performing under 50%, it is kind of telling of the fact that a lot of people just build Divine Sunder just because, not because it's actually the best, but just because that's what they build. That's what they think is best, because that's what everyone tells them is the best. However, if you take a look at even Kraken Slayer, I mean, it has 25,000 games played. That's not a small sample size at all, and it has almost a 4% higher win rate than Divine Sunder. So, in my opinion, there are just better mythics than Divine Sunder in most scenarios, and I hope this kind of backs up some of my claims about the fact that the other mythics are better than Divine Sunder, and I think time will prove me right. Alright guys, I hope that explains everything. If you have any further questions, make sure to ask me in the comments. I will answer any questions that you guys have about the builds, any clarification you need. Basically anything you want to ask me, feel free. I'm sorry for the absence on these kinds of videos. Like I said, I wanted to make sure I got you the best information possible, and in order to do that, I needed to do some research and actually play the game and see how everything shaped up. But I hope you guys enjoyed, I hope you learned, and I hope this was helpful. So if it was, make sure to leave a like, consider subscribing, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.